Hi, everybody. This is the week ahead. I'm Tony Nash. Today, we're joined by Bob Iaccino, Tracy Shuchart, and Albert Marko. Bob, you've been on here before. Thanks again for coming on. This was great. You and Jim do such amazing work. I don't know how many podcasts you guys have. You're like 4 now, right, or something?
Yeah, we have three going.
3. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the work you do for kind of the community in terms of getting stuff out there is huge. And honestly, I hope people appreciate it because you guys spend so much time and resource on that.
They're eating the cats.
It's a lot. So
They're eating the pets.
sorry, I'm hearing some.
That was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. They're eating the pets.
Yeah, it's a great way to start the show. So today we're not talking about pets.
No, I didn't realize the volume was up. I'm sorry.
We're not talking about pets today. We're talking about market sentiment and risk. We're talking about oil prices, and they've fallen if you haven't been paying attention. We're talking about some U.S. Election scenarios with Albert. So, Bob, there's something we need to clarify since we started on such a serious note. You and Jim were talking about something a few days ago, and Tracy, since you're a chef or almost a chef, I want to ask you how you pronounce this. Gnocchi.
Gnocchi?
Huh?
Gnocchi.
So,
Gnocchi.
okay, let's start with my last name. My last name begins with IAC, right? IA makes a YA sound.
Yeah,
it's actually Italian's very intuitive. It's actually very phonetic. Okay, so if you say, a lot of people would say Iaccino, and that's Americanizing it or Englishizing it, where it's actually Iaccino, right? Because if you actually were to put I and A together, it does kind of You can see where it makes that sound. Gnocchi is the same thing. G and N makes sort of a combined GN sound.
It's so like the Enye in Spanish. It's like
what?
the Enye in Spanish.
Exactly. So it's actually the proper way to say it is gnocchi, right? So you're almost starting with a guttural G. Now, I don't give a shit. Sorry, did we swear on this? I don't care, to be honest, how people pronounce Italian words.
Yeah, I just wanted to start it on the right tone, right? So
I think we
care
actually. When I grew up with a lot of 3rd and 4th and 5th generation guys. You'd be like, hey, you're Italian? I'm Italian too. You know, we like the Ganakis and we like the Gabardelles. Okay, stop. You've actually got a vowel at the either say it properly or say it the way an American would say it, which is a lot of Americans say Naki or Noki. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
But when an Italian guy, screws it up, like Gabardelles is Cavatelli, that they've just taken in dialect and just mumbled.
Cavatelli. Yeah, like pappardelle, right? And so
exactly.
I lived in Florence for just over a year, and my grandmother's maiden name was Marko, so I kind of felt like I had to raise up that crucial financial markets issue before we dug into it. So
I went to Paris years ago, and the person I was with spoke French, and literally we got treated like kings because we were trying. Right. And that's, I think, is the only thing. If you're trying, it's fine. I don't care. I don't care if people mispronounce my name. It's not Smith. I get it. I've had people call me multiple things. Through high school, I was Iaccino my whole life. I lost your sound. That could be me.
Yeah, I get that. So now that we've got that straightened out, I want to talk about sentiment and risk, Bob. You've got, gosh, I think you've been trading as long as Tracy's been alive, right? So
I think so.
Yeah. I want to ask about some disciplinary things because we're at a place in markets. I've got an S&P chart on the screen, the 12-month S&P chart. And I think we can talk a lot about this, but where we are in markets, we've got Fed meeting coming up, we've got election, we've got all sorts of things. How do you factor sentiment and risk into your thinking as you look at a chart like this? It's not up and to the right. How do you factor those things in? And then what's your current assessment of what you're looking at?
So I'll say in my role as an active trader, right? I almost don't factor it in at all because it's factored in my view, into price action, right? So price action is mob. It's mob mentality. It's mob rules. So when you see, for example, the last few days in the S&P, you've seen wicks and then rallies to close, right? Well, that's the mob saying, all right, buy the dip, right? But when you look at the 12-month S&P chart, like you're seeing here, it really looks like it's rolling over. So it's a matter of durations for me, all right?
Sure.
If somebody says to me, I really want to know what stocks are going to do over the next 6-8 months, be like, well, I don't have a crystal ball, but they look weak. I really want to know what stocks are going to do over the next 3 or 4 days. Well, next 3 or 4 days, if I were using, for example, S&P futures as a model, I'd say we're probably going to be up, I don't know, somewhere in the range of another 1.8%, somewhere in that
Just
range.
a random number, one.
Just a random, that would be like a short term. I'm not
Right.
long it because I don't have a pattern to trade. I don't have a signal from the way that I look in markets. But to me, traders and active investors spend way too much time trying to answer the why question.
Yep.
Why is this happening? I don't care why it's happening.
Yep.
I liken it to, you turn your washing machine on and it starts leaking, right? You don't run around and go, why is this happening? Why is this happening? While your laundry room fills up with water. You hit the off button, you throw some towels down, and then you go, okay, what just happened and what am I going to do about it?
Right.
Right? The what you're going to do about it is stopping and throwing towels down. To me, that's exiting trades that aren't working. So sentiment is only important to me in one place. And I know I'm rambling on.
No, you're not. This is great.
The ISM manufacturing PMI has been in contraction territory for 21 of 23 months, right? Now, that's not actual contraction in manufacturing. It's a survey of purchasing managers and how they feel their businesses. I really don't like that they define it.
Actual data, right?
Exactly.
When I talk
I
about
don't like
surveys,
that they,
I always tell people that.
well, I don't like the way that they define it as expansion or contraction because it's not technically that. It's how the purchasing managers feel about that data. Having said that, it correlates to the stock market with about a 4-month lag in the 80th percentile. So it's very indicative of what's going to happen with stocks, which also are affected by sentiment. So I look at it within the context of that.
That's great. Since you're talking about recent data, we've had CPI and PPI come out this week. What's your read on the relevance of those right now? With Fed coming up, with where markets are at and other things. I'm just curious, how do you take that data in?
So the last couple of pieces of data, CPI and PPI, told me the Fed's going 25, not 50. That's where I factored in. It wasn't a big enough miss to drive them to 50 or to nothing. Right. And you saw, like, if you use the CME Fed watch tool as a proxy yesterday, and I haven't looked at it today yet, which is unlike me, to be honest. But yesterday it got to about an 84.6% chance of a 25 basis point rate cut. I've never seen it wrong above 95%. And we're moving in that direction. This is the highest level in over a month in terms of 25 being the highest probability that the market is priced in. And a lot of people will, when a move's going against them, they'll say the market's wrong. Market's never wrong. You're wrong if you're a trader or an investor, right? If you're long-term, the market can be wrong all the time. But my average hold time is about 20, well, it was about 26 days. It's dropped to about 24. I can be wrong a lot. The market's never wrong. So I'm looking at it as being 25 basis points. That's the relevancy of this data. I think something that people miss in PPI all the time. PPI was a little bit stronger last month as well. And people were like, well, CPI already showed that it's not getting priced in. CPI lags PPI by a month.
Yep.
And that's pretty obvious,
Or
right?
two.
Because
Yeah.
we got this month's CPI and this month's PPI. The input on PPI is a little bit stronger. The rate of change of CPI has been rising. Okay. There's still very small numbers, but it's been rising over the last 4 data points. That's the rate of change. So we want to keep an eye on that going forward, but not today.
Yeah, so I used to be an economist. I'm a kind of a recovering economist now, and we used to ask
I'm a
those
recovering Catholic, so that's good.
yeah, we used to ask those why questions all the time. We used to struggle with the whys, and to be honest, we were always wrong. It's really entertaining to watch an economist struggle with the whys of things when all they're really running is correlations. So there is no why there. It's a constructed story, and I love talking to traders because traders don't care about the why. They care about right now, and they care
Why's a
about the
hobby?
trend.
Why
Sorry.
for me is a hobby.
Yep.
Like I
Exactly.
love trying to figure out why something happened because friends and family at parties and get-togethers always ask me why it happened.
Yeah.
So I like to be able to explain it to them, but it has nothing to do with what I do on my screens here.
Right. So on your screens, what are you watching right now? And I'm not asking for necessarily names. I'm just in general, like, what are you watching in terms of action that's happening? What are you watching in terms of sectors, those sorts of things? What's on your mind kind of right now? Because again, going to the election, it's less than 2 months away. I think there's a lot of tentativeness, at least that's what I get. There's a lot of tentativeness there seems in markets until that happens. And it's almost as if people have their two scenarios that they're going to execute based on what happens in November. Is that a little bit of what you're feeling?
A little bit. So I'm watching two things really closely. One, I'm watching Bitcoin because I think it's the only place where there's a clear difference between the two candidates, economically speaking. If you include crypto into the economy, a lot of people don't. I probably don't. But Trump is actually verbally committed to Bitcoin, potentially being part of the Treasury's holdings, which the Treasury does fall under the executive branch, but I don't know if he quite has the ability or the authority to do that. I don't know. But definitely when you look at the almost 7% rally of Bitcoin the day before the debate, and then the two struggled rallies after the debate where Bitcoin tried to rally and failed, up 6.7% or 6.8% the day before the rally, up 55 basis points since then. It's just struggling. All right. So I kind of see that to me is one of the clearest points where the election may affect an asset class. Outside of that, the data is the data. Historically, November, December are strong, and they're historically stronger in election years, regardless of who wins. So I am going to be long stocks as we get into the election, just because the historical data is so strong. Having said that, as a second layer effect, I'm looking at energy. And this sounds like I'm just trying to lead into Tracy because I like and respect her so much. Not that. Crude oil to me is overdone. But I understand why it's overdone. I'm not long and I'm not short. And energy itself, to me, has another second level effect that has not been proven out by some of the studies I've seen. But we're expecting gas prices to drop below $3 a gallon before the election. That gives people money. And if you look at the weekly Johnson Red Book, which is one of the retail sales indicators I like to look at, it's been rising. It's literally forecasting a resumptive consumer in terms of spending. And if they have more money, because gas is the one thing that doesn't fall into the replacement theory of inflation, right? It's not like steak's expensive, we buy chicken. Gas is expensive, we buy what? Nothing else, it's gas. So if people have money left over after they fill their tank, they spend. Now, I haven't seen any study prove that out, but it's logical to me.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm going to make you guys really jealous here, but it's $2.60 in my neighborhood. So
Wow.
we've already broken $3 in my neighborhood, which
I'm not
is
going to dox you, but I'm headed there to fill up my tank. It might be cheaper.
Dude,
So I want to take a step back on
we're still at over $4.
where.
I don't know what you guys are thinking. Well, I'm not gonna dox myself entirely, but I'm on
Okay.
the
You're
on
in
the
one of the
East
50
Coast.
states.
I'm on the East Coast of Florida. So
Yeah, the
it's
west coast
still-
of Florida, I did like 349 the other day,
Okay.
but that was
260.
premium.
Okay, so you're even cheaper than I
262.
am. Maybe
Yeah.
because you're closer to Tejas.
Could be.
Probably.
But I also for me, it's premium gasoline because I have a giant V8 engine that makes way
Oh,
too much
sweet.
noise.
Very good.
So,
Premium, you paid what?
349 a gallon. Yeah.
Premium. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I
Hey, I want to
hate
take a step
buying.
back on you mentioned Bitcoin and the possibility of Bitcoin being held in the Treasury. Albert, is it feasible to hold Bitcoin in the Treasury?
I mean, theoretically, not in reality though. I mean, I would not, I would, my mind would blow if they decided to put crypto in the treasury. It would be insane to have some sort of random currency that nobody knows where the servers and nodes are and who the holders are and so on and so forth into the treasury. I would absolutely lose my shit if that happened. You know,
Now I want it to happen.
I'm just confirming we do cuss here. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For this, for sure.
So it's my relatively unemotional assessment is it seems really volatile to hold in the treasury, right?
Of course. I mean, that's part of the I mean, there's so many problems involved with crypto. It's like, why would you put an unstable currency that's held by God knows who in the reserve currency's piggy bank? I mean, that's
Can I ask you guys a legitimate question?
Yeah, of course.
This is a question I haven't figured out an answer for yet. Does a decent amount of that volatility go away if it's adopted as a holding by the U.S. government? I haven't figured that out.
It depends on how much they could accumulate, right? 95% of Bitcoin is owned by like 5% of wallets. Whose are they? You know, I mean, are they hedge funds? Are they Chinese government? Nobody knows.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
Yeah, I think unless they can somehow manipulate or control the price, they're not going to hold it.
Of course not. Under what logic does it make sense to have the reserve currency issuer hold something that they can't control in some manner? Just how does that? What are we talking about? You know what I mean?
I do not for a second believe in the immutability of the blockchain. I'm sorry. But it's ones and zeros. It can be broken. It's not immutable, no matter how many times people say that. Sorry, Tracy.
Yeah, I mean, just being devil's advocate here, could they set up a special purpose account just for Bitcoin outside of the treasury or next to the treasury, but not within the treasury?
That's no idea. I mean, we'd have to get a treasury secretary out here.
I'm just throwing it out there just for.
No, but this is really interesting. I think so. If they do it, Albert says a huge portion is owned by 5% of all the holders. So it's, from my perspective, it'd be a huge subsidy to those 5% of people who are holding it. So the Chinese People's Liberation Army, you know, organized crime, you know, those sorts of people. And of course, there are genuine people who hold this as well. But
yeah, like the
biggest holders are
nice.
Well, here's one of the things that I don't subscribe to. I don't subscribe to first of all, the Bitcoin being immutable. I agree with you, Tony, and Albert. I agree. I don't know if there's a special purpose vehicle they could set up, or you know, if they could even accumulate enough to matter. And also, you know, people who sit here and say Trump's going to deliver on everything he says are delusional. He's already not delivered on certain things, right?
Right.
For example, the release of all the Kennedy files. They weren't all released.
Right.
And a ton of them were redacted. So there's obviously things he says that he maybe thinks he can do, and then he rethinks it, or they're just for votes or whatever it is. Sure. But I calculate about a 22% rally if the election is called for Trump in Bitcoin, simply because of that fact. And then it's probably a rally to sell for the reasons you guys state. But I don't, and I've said this before, somebody said to me once, I was doing an interview on WGN radio in Chicago when I was visiting Chicago, which I don't like to do anymore. But, and they said to me, they go, well, you know, criminals use it. And I asked the radio host, I said, what do you got in your pocket right now? He goes, what do you mean? I go, you have it, empty your pockets. And he pulled out a wad of cash. I go, criminals use that too. So the Chinese government accumulates dollars. The Colombian government, remember how many dollars Escobar had when they actually finally got to him. There was dollars all over the place. So to me, that part isn't as important as what Tony said and Albert agreed on. They can be broken, right? That to me is the biggest part. And we already know the anonymity is gone. Like the anonymity of Bitcoin is a fiction because they've been able to retrieve Bitcoin that has been stolen in the past. I don't know how they did it. I'm not smart enough to know how they did it, But that part of it makes it a very suspect plan to me as well.
Well, yeah, and if quantum computing is where people act like it is and going where people act like it's going, then it's totally breakable. You know, you can definitely break that. And again, people can talk to me as long as they want about the immutability of the blockchain. I just don't believe it, given where compute is going.
Like I've always said, Tony, when anybody that sits there and talks about absolutes is just doesn't know what they're talking about and bullshitting the entire time, right? There's no absolutes in anything. So
Right. So it's interesting though, Bob, the way you say, you know, after the election, Bitcoin can rally 20% or something like that. And I think it's that way in a lot of it, whether you look at oil, whether you look at Bitcoin,
Yeah.
whether you look at equities. I think there's a lot of scenarios that are very directional one way or the other based upon which candidate wins. So I just think that's very interesting.
I don't think anything will rally as much as Bitcoin does, because I don't think any participants in assets are as, God, I don't think I can use this word and make it not sound like an insult, delusional, as Bitcoin holders are. So, but by the way, I don't mean that they're like stupid or crazy. I just think that they, you know, here we are talking back and forth, four people who believe it could be good, but also don't believe in some of the sort of Superman-like qualities of the blockchain, right?
Right.
They are like, it's Superman. There's nothing can happen. There's no such thing as kryptonite. Nothing. It's Superman. You can't do anything to Superman.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of describes the Bitcoin community, where, you know, to them, it's like the inevitability is death, taxes, and Bitcoin can't be cracked. And I just don't believe that either.
Yeah.
So I think Bitcoin can rally just because of the way the community treats it, so to speak, or like looks at it as completely undeniably indestructible. And I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just he's right. It's just, you know, most of the anger that I have with the entire Bitcoin community is them being so rah-rah about the dollar dying and gold dying and the government's falling and you only can use Bitcoin and that's going to save the world. It's like, come on, man. It's like we know you're grifters, but stop spreading propaganda and lies just to make a few bucks on your Bitcoin that you're going to flip to somebody else later.
Yeah, I don't really care. Like, I don't hate the Bitcoin people or anything. It's just, it's not a currency. It's an asset. It's like gold. It's an asset. So
They act very much like the Tesla bros did for a long time.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
And Tesla is down 176% from its highs or something. I'm sorry, 43% from its highs right now. But it did at one point fall from its highs a total of about 74%. And a lot of those people are like, buy every dip in Tesla. And, you know, I actually started teasing them like, this one too, this one too, this one too, as it continued to drop. And they were just continuing to get, and there's people that bought near the highs, you know, that they're still down. I don't know. I mean, 30, 40% from where they bought it, because there was no way that Tesla was ever going down. It's worse for the Bitcoin people.
yeah. And NVIDIA, I just feel sorry for that person who bought NVIDIA at the highs. So, but we won't go there here because that could go into a very long conversation. So, okay, speaking of volatility, Tracy, let's talk about oil. I saw, well, we've seen crude prices really fall in September, and you posted something about Jim Cramer saying that it was a good time to be in oil or something like that.
So, no, that it was not. He said, get out of oil, basically, was the post.
Oh, Kramer said, get out of oil. Okay.
Literally on Tuesday at the lows.
Really?
That's typical Kramer.
Perfection.
Unbelievable.
The best counter indicator on the planet.
But yeah, he said, he said, you know, now is not the time to be in oil. He likes IBM.
Oh God. Sorry, IBM. You've lost your jobs for Christmas.
It's literally like, I'm allergic to cheese, so I ride my bike.
Right.
Like,
that was the craziest headline. And I read the article and that's literally what he said. It's like, I wouldn't be long here right now. He doesn't like oil. He doesn't like XOM. He's rather be long IBM. And I mean, just funny that it, you know, just so happened to be the low of this week, not saying forever, but
Yes. So tell us what's happening with crude. Are we going to continue to see this fall, or have we hit the lows because Kramer said the opposite?
I mean, I don't have a magic 8 ball. That said, what I can look at is what positioning looks like. And if we look at positioning, we've had, hedge funds manage money this short or not long since 2002. I mean, even when oil prices went negative, we had not this amount of people disinterested in the oil market right now. Let's put it in that respect. And so I think there's a general disinterest right now. I think positioning is overstretched to the downside. So that could set us up for, a squeeze, especially if, I think if you start seeing over $70, CTA Momo traders are going to start getting back on this trade that they have been dumping since they're coming out. So, I think a lot of things have to do with positioning when you're looking at this market, because fundamentally this market is still tight. And I know that people are looking at, well, OPEC is holding excess capacity, because of the cuts. So the capacity is there, they could turn it on, but we all know that they're not going to. And so the physical market still at this juncture, with all being said as it is, if everybody producing where they are right now, this market is tight. Yes, OPEC could turn on the taps anytime they wanted. They do have excess capacity. I understand that, but right now the fundamentals are still tight. We're still seeing backwardation in this in the crude curve. So that's not really telling me that we should, this is looking like it's about to fall off the cliff. And you also have to look at the fact that I think what most people overlook when we're looking at this market is if you're trading the CME product, CL, WTI, that product is actually Cushing. And most traders don't realize they're actually trading Cushing, and we're starting to scrape the bottoms of the barrels again in Cushing. To be honest with you, we're sitting at about 22 million barrels out of stated capacity is 90 million barrels, but we'll say working capacity is about 75 million barrels. So at 22 million barrels, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the tanks right now. I mean, that's very low. We haven't seen this in quite a long time. We saw this kind of in 2020 after we bottomed out and nobody was producing, and they just kind of scraped out of what we had in storage. But we've been slowly building over the last couple of years since then. But so far the last few months here, we've been draining Cushing stocks. So yeah, and that also says a lot about about refining. Sorry, go on. Sorry, I rambled.
No, how much is the price action on recession concerns? Because it seems to be picking up.
A lot on recession concerns, and has been for 2 years. I mean, oil's been trading in a range, but in quite a large range, right? Because we've been going from geopolitical issues to, oh my God, China is in a recession. Oh my God, we're going to be in a recession, to geopolitical issues to, oh my God.
88, right? Over the last 6 months, between 72 and 88, and kind of comfortably in that range.
Yeah, it's been very comfortable in that range. And if you spread that timeline out a little bit for the last couple of years, we've been at that probably, I would say 65 to 95 range. And again, that's a $30 range. That's a huge range, but it's still, if you look over the long term at a long-term chart in crude oil, it's still been very range bound, though the range again has been very large.
Okay. So Albert, given the politics of the moment, is it possible for our friends in the federal government to allow oil to rally much?
I mean, allow. Yeah, I mean, they could, not much. I mean, you certainly don't want to see gas at $5 a gallon in case there's kind of problem. I don't think that they even need to do that. I don't, like Tracy said, there's just no real interest right now in oil. You know what I mean? And with the recession talk looming, it's like what are you gonna be long on? I mean, I have a bunch of trader friends that just don't want to touch any contracts until after the election, you know, just because they don't know what's going to happen, whether it's Trump or Kamala. You know, on top of that, I mean, oil doesn't look good. I mean, I could even see high 50s coming in before the election. You know, just never know nowadays. You know, I mean, high 50s, I would definitely be buying oil, but that's just me.
So Tracy, what are your scenarios based on who wins? Does oil rally under one candidate and fall under another? What does that look like?
Here, my opinion is that generally oil is independent of whoever's in office. I would say that, you know, if we look at U.S. oil production in the United States that has risen during the Biden administration, I would say that is in spite of, not because of. I think it's, you know, relatively speaking, how much you're producing really has little to do with whoever's in charge. Once again, you can make things more difficult by limiting permits, limiting federal lands, et cetera, et cetera. But in the same respect, you know, Trump says drill, baby, drill. He can't actually make these producers drill, and they're probably not going to, just because he says drill, baby, drill, and or makes permitting a lot easier, unless it's economical for them. Because we have to, again, realize that, you know, if we look at, you know, we went from energy being 20% of the S&P 500 to about 4% now, 3.5%, 4% now. Oil companies are struggling to get customers back, to get investors back. I mean, and so, you know, I don't think they're not going to go crazy again. Like, we've already had 2 huge boom and bust eras. You know, they ran through bank money, they ran through VC money, they ran through private equity money.
Right.
You know, right now they would really need to get their act together, and they're just starting to get their act together over the last few years. And I don't really think that is going to change, regardless of who is president at the time, to be honest with you.
Okay. And Bob, with your 24-day horizon, what are you seeing in crude markets that's just notable for you?
So if I just talk a little bit about process, my crude oil charts are set up more for selling rallies and buying dips. Now, doing them, no. And the reason is, that's my sort of fundamental, I want to sleep at night filter. Crude oil specifically, and it generally grinds lower and spikes higher. So I don't mind catching shorts on crude oil if I can, you know, shrink my position size and contain my risk pretty well. And arguably I can do that here. But we've got hot spots, right? Specifically, obviously, in the Middle East, where there doesn't seem to be any chance of peace talks. You know, wars are not won by peace talks. They're won by victory and surrender. So even if there is a peace treaty, usually that's a precursor to another strike at some point in the future that I can't predict. So I've got a pretty powerful short setup here if we get back up to about 71.90. But my stop takes me all the way up above 77.41. I trade the futures when I trade crude. And the reason is I used to do TV. Well, I still do TV. I do Fox and I do Bloomberg, but CNBC, I told them in much more Chicago language that I didn't want to do their shows anymore. And that's because, you know, for me, when I've got that wide of a stop, I got to shrink down to the micros, which is fine with me. But then I look at it and I'm like, I don't even really want to do this, right? I like to get on a hot air balloon that's going up rather than one that's falling. Subsequently, I like to get on a trade that's headed south, not one that's headed north, and wait for it to turn around and head south. Right now, crude oil is kind of like turning to the upside, and that's the rally I'd like to sell again around 71.90 or so. But I don't think I'm going to do it because of the conflict, because all we need is a retaliatory strike by Iran. that goads Israel into a major strike on Iran. That's, what is it now, Tracy? 3.1 million barrels, somewhere in that range from Iran. That's a big supply disruption. Supply disruptions are what caused the spikes higher in crude oil. So I personally prefer to get into longs in crude oil, and I'm just not showing any. Now, energy stocks, I would like to see a long setup if Trump were to win, because he's going to push them to.
100%.
Exactly. I think energy stocks have a chance to be more profitable before even crude turns around if there's a Trump victory. You asked about sectors with the elections.
Agreed.
That'd be one I'd be looking at, is the energy sector, as opposed to, but I've always said this, I've said this on TV, like, if you have an opinion in crude oil, do you know what's 100% correlated to crude oil? Crude oil. So you should trade the actual oil, not the stocks. I see a differentiating factor here between Trump and the energy companies and Trump and crude oil.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that 100%. And just for the record, we have no position here on crude oil right now. I don't really see an edge here personally. So it's kind of sit and wait as far as the futures market's concerned.
Yeah, just in terms of our outlook, we, and I don't talk about that much on here, but we had crude going down to 70 before the end of the year, and it's accelerated to the downside even faster than we thought. So, I think what you're talking about, Tracy, things being oversold a bit, I think you're right. And
Yeah, I mean, we're up another almost 3% today.
Right.
We're almost back to 70, so.
Right, exactly. So, okay, very interesting. So let's move on to the election, because, I mean, we had just such an exciting debate this week on Tuesday, Albert, that I want to kind of, and back to the kind of cat meme that we heard at the top of the show. Albert, just very quick, your assessment of the debate. Did it? Yeah, just your quick assessment of the debate, 30 seconds. We've heard this for the past couple of days. I'm just curious, your very quick assessment.
Well, Trump needed to show that Kamala is, a lunatic on policy and two-faced on most of the issues that comes out of her mouth, and he didn't do that. It was quite the opposite. I mean, she didn't answer any questions, but she didn't really need to, because Trump went on tirades of personal, vendetta rants, for a good, hour. So it's really, he really needed to show up, and he didn't. And I think that hurt him, specifically with whoever's left on the fence. Okay, it's going to be small amounts of people, whether they come out or not for an individual candidate. So that's what I think for the short little answer here for the debate.
Yeah, and for anybody who wants to dig into the detail of that, Albert and I covered that in our Cloak and Dagger video. You can find that in my feed and in his feed. We covered that yesterday. Now, you, a few days ago, put out on Cloak and Dagger an article titled "A Few Election Scenarios." So can you walk us through that? What are your election scenarios now?
Well, they've really compacted now since the debate happened. A lot of it was debate oriented, and what Kamala could do during debate, and whether she looks bad or, had a Biden 2.0 performance, but she did not. So at this point, it's all about the economy. I mean, people vote with their wallets, and it's pure and simple. What can be done with inflation? What can be done with, is the markets falling? Are we having job losses? So on and so forth. And I just don't, even though we are having job losses, the data doesn't show that because of whatever they're putting out there's,
Well, they won't be revised for 11 months. So it's all good until next August, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the inflation number keeps coming down, which we all know is absolute horseshit, but it is what it is. And media can take those numbers and display them out to the masses 24/7. So, at this point, I had Harris winning, 60% chance. I think it's up to like 70% chance at this moment. I just don't think the numbers are there for Trump in the electoral college realities, specifically in Michigan. He's got no chance. And Pennsylvania, they keep talking about him having a chance. I don't see it. And again, it falls back to Wisconsin, what I've been saying for about 12 months. It's like all eyes are on Wisconsin. Can Trump upset her in Wisconsin? I don't know. I mean, last time there was a 96% turnout in Wisconsin, similar to what Saddam Hussein would be getting. So can that happen again? Surely not. Can the youth vote come out for Kamala Harris? I know firsthand that Democrats are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into Wisconsin because they know that that's do or die for everybody.
Can I ask you guys something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, Tracy, is there stress in, well, let me rephrase it. Is the fracking in Ohio, is it substantial? Is it enough to actually swing the vote? Because obviously it doesn't matter what she says now. There's a clip of her out there saying, I would absolutely ban fracking. So this is something I don't know. Is the fracking in Ohio substantial? Does it matter to the overall US production? Then Albert, is there any risk in Ohio in either direction?
Well, I think she was referring to Pennsylvania at the time, which
Okay.
is a which is a problem, not a huge problem, but it is important to the East Coast because you have to realize there's not a lot of pipeline activity to the East Coast. So anything relative, this is why we had a problem when Pennsylvania's largest refinery shut down, and we didn't have enough room in Cushing pipeline to bring it up to the East Coast, and we saw gasoline prices explode on the East Coast. And so I think that any kind of production in the Northeast is going to be worrisome for that area because that's just going to increase costs all around for energy to get to the Northeast.
So I guess, Albert, you already said you don't see a possibility in Pennsylvania, but what about Ohio? It's obviously
Ohio. No, Trump's not losing Ohio. That's just
okay.
That's there's no chance of that. The fracking issue in Pennsylvania, I don't really make that big of a deal about it. It wasn't that big of an issue in 2020 when Biden won and Kamala coming out there saying, I'm going to ban everything with fracking under the sun. That's just, I don't really, for me, this election is purely on jobs, inflation, and on the Republican side, and abortion, and saving the democracy on the Democratic side. And those are the four narratives. And unfortunately for Trump, the abortion and the whole democracy issue is a winner with the youth vote. And if Harris gets the youth vote out in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, it's game over.
So what does Trump have to do? I mean, it sounds to me like you're saying Harris needs to get the youth vote out. That's the big deal. What does Trump have to do?
Trump needs to have his entire campaign plant their asses in Wisconsin and sit there and convince whatever independent voters are left out there to come out and vote for him. Now, Wisconsin's weird, man. I mean, the Wisconsinites are just weird people. They're more libertarians than anything else, especially.
My mom was born there.
What? Who was?
My mother.
You?
My mother. Yeah.
Obviously, you can see it in the genetics that come.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I have a lot of Wisconsin friends, and they're just all weird. This is the way they are, and they have conservative values, but they don't really like the whole Trump branding, which I don't blame, to be honest with you, because I don't like the Trump branding myself. I think it's more of like a WWF PR campaign rather than a political campaign. Has been my complaint day one. So again, it's going to be very, very, very tight in Wisconsin. So I still think that Kamala wins, but I'm hoping that's not.
So I'm one of those people, guys, just so you know. Well, that's a whole nother conversation that we'll have over drinks down here in Florida. But no, I've never voted for Trump. So I get accused of Trumper all the time because I'm conservative. I'm very conservative politically. I'm socially liberal, but I'm conservative politically. I voted for Gary Johnson and Joe Jorgensen, and my whole thing was, I don't want to be blamed for either one of these idiots. In this particular case, I believe one idiot is much worse than the other, and I'm going to vote for Trump for the first time in my life. So anybody out there listening says, oh, you're just another Trumper in hiding. I never voted for him until now. And part of the reason I agree with you so much about the branding, like, the whole idea of bringing Hulk Hogan to do a speech at the RNC, I'm like, why? To me, it's similar as it's the same as Megan Thee Stallion at the DNC. It's like, I don't care what these people think at all, literally at all. but it appeals to somebody. I don't know who it is. I totally agree with you. But the thing now, like to me, the idea of a threat to democracy being Trump cracks me up, because the amount of authoritarianism that we're seeing from the Democrats this time around, that's not John Kennedy stuff at all.
Mhm.
You know, it's just not. And yeah, they had an opportunity, I think, with RFK to bring somebody I would have voted for over Trump, even though I disagree with probably 85% of his policies, just because of that branding thing.
Yeah, it's really annoying, and it's dumbing down America. I mean, we used to have debates with actual, policy discussions between the candidates for hours at a time, and now we have Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt off with Trumpomania on his chest, and Megan Thee Stallion twerking on the stage.
There was literally no policy discussion. It was
this is disgusting. It's just the state of America.
We're better than that, I think, as a country. And, I know nobody wants to be president. It's a really shitty job, but, we could find better candidates.
It would have been so easy in this debate. I don't know if you guys agree, but the minute that Kamala said, go to one of his rallies, people leave early because they're bored. As soon as she said that, I go, he's going to focus on the rally. He's going to say, no, not at my rallies. My rallies are great. No one's ever seen rallies like this. And with the moderators fact checking him versus Kamala 100% to 0, right? When the moderators did, all you had to do is say, are you going to ask her if that Charlottesville statement is complete and accurate? Are you going to ask her or are you going to fact check her on Project 2025? Project 2025 was written by Kevin Roberts. I know Kevin Roberts. He's been on our show. It's not a Trump policy manifesto at all, but they don't fact check him. But he went off and played crazy talk, which drives me crazy.
So let me ask you guys this, because I hear the idyllic past of having, the multiple hour-long debates and, Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan and all that
Call
stuff.
me old without calling me old.
Right,
Tony.
super boring. But what I'm wondering is, and what I've seen since the debate, is a lot of social media about different things on the debate, like, eating pets, and like, the moderators not being fair, and like Kamala having, some sort of calm in her ear. Whether this stuff is true or not, does that stuff have more of an impact? And I would argue that it probably does have more of an impact with people like the youth vote than the actual debate itself. What do you guys think about that?
I don't know. I think that the debate in general did nothing. I think
nobody changed.
I mean, I think if you're a Trump supporter, you stayed a Trump supporter. If you're a Kamala supporter, you stayed a Kamala. I don't think it made any difference. I'm not even sure it made much of a difference to independent voters, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Man,
come on, Albert, social media, no efficacy whatsoever.
It's just we're just getting dumbed down, right? The entire thing is completely dumbed down. It's catchphrases, so it's weaponized in social media. They don't care if it's true or not, right? Trump is Hitler.
100%.
It's blasted through the entire media organization, right? Haitians are grilling cats on the grill in Ohio. It's blasted on the other side of the social media. I don't give a shit. I just want to see who is going to fix the problem in the long bond market. Who's going to fix trade? Who's going to fix the Bitcoin issue? But why don't no one talks about small businesses that are going under at a stunning rate, right? Nobody talks about the SBA loans that they can easily just, like the small business and medium business SBA loans that they can easily just kill, rather than giving Ukraine $700 billion a week. You know what I mean? Nobody talks.
Yeah, Kamala Harris mentioned a $50,000, I think, tax credit for startups. Okay, here's the
$25,000 to illegal aliens for
right. So $50,000 tax credit for startups. The problem with that is you actually have to show a profit before you can get that tax credit. So it sounds like you're bootstrapping small companies, but in fact, you're actually giving them false hope and strangling them, because they have to show a $50,000 profit before they can get that tax credit. So it's this elusive kind of you're not really a startup anymore when you're kind of doing that. And so, or you don't know how to do your books when you're doing that. So, it's kind of this weird thing that is a nice, soundbite, but I run a small business. I'm still trying to get my money for the retention tax credit from the IRS from 2021. Okay. So these programs that are that have been put out by the Biden administration, that are talked about by Harris, I'm not convinced that small business can benefit from that. So Albert, I agree with you. I wish Trump would have pushed back on her and said, tell me about that $50,000 tax credit. How in fact would that work?
And there's no pushback because Trump doesn't know himself. I mean, come on, let's just be honest.
No, exactly.
Exactly.
This is the level of discourse that
100%
we're not
agree.
getting. We're not getting that level of discourse from either side.
And I get the same shit as Bob gets, all the time. It's like, oh, you're a MAGA Trumper, blah blah blah. I'm like, man, I have to vote for the guy because I have to, not because the Democratic side doesn't put up anybody that's like real or logical, and by any means, right? It's just the way it is. Do I like him? No. Do I have to vote for him? Yes. Looking at this Marxist communist coming into like the Treasury and the Fed under Kamala, God, man, what are we talking about?
Let me ask you this. Let's 2024 is a sunk cost, I think, right? It's kind of decided. I think we'll know in November, but I think whatever's going to happen is going to happen. When do we as a country get out of this weird comic book political funk? Does that happen in 2026? Does that happen in 2028? Bob?
There's an old saying, and I don't know who said it. I first learned in Italian, so I'm just going to say Italians invented it because I say Italians invented everything.
Yep.
The fool precedes the savior. Now, we have to, in order to break that thought down, you have to realize that when that phrase originated, a fool was a court jester, right? Not like somebody who's stupid and dull and drooling all over himself, but someone who could make fun of the king, like in Roman times or in medieval times, without being shot. Well, they wouldn't be shot, without being hung or decapitated, right? Because it was for entertainment purposes. So stand-up comics would be the fool right now, right? And in terms of powerful positions, the fool precedes the savior basically says that someone has to get into a position of power that basically says anything he or she wants to say with no repercussions anywhere in order for it to open the eyes of the public to vote for a savior, right? So I think 2028 is when I think we could start to turn this stuff around. Because you have two fools right now, really.
Stop it. You're giving me hope. So just stop.
Well, regardless of, I was asked by somebody recently on a show we did if I was positive or negative on the US. It might have been you, Tony, and I was negative. I'm like, I'm just very depressed about it. But I started putting my phone down for a half an hour at the start of the day. If I wake up, I don't look at my phone, I grab a book. Right. And I usually try to make it not a political book, although the last one was Social Justice Fallacies by Thomas Sowell, which just really makes you angry. But if you look at it from that perspective, Trump is the fool because he says things that are true, but he says them in crazy comical ways. I'm not referring to cat comment. I'm referring to like the CIA and the FBI, and I don't even like using deep state, but certain parts of the deep state. We know Biden's not running the country right now. We doubt that Kamala is. So who's running it? Like, I know that the president doesn't necessarily have to flip a switch every morning for the country to run, but there's two wars going on, two significant, substantial wars going on. And Biden's on the beach. He's putting Trump hats on, not even knowing what he's doing.
Right.
Which honestly, whoever gave him that hat, I love my firemen and everything, but that's elder abuse. He didn't know what he was doing there. So stop it.
Before,
This doesn't even like just boil down to the president, whether Kamala or Trump wins and whatnot. It's like even Congress has been watered down through all these elections and this nonsense. I mean, does Congress have any clue of how bad the deficit's going to get? I mean, we're tracking at what, 7.7 trillion in expenditures. This is before Kamala Harris would come in, and with 4 trillion revenues and like boom times, right? Imagine revenues drop $3 trillion, right? We could easily see a 3 to 6 trillion budget deficit. That's not financeable. How do you finance that? right?
Yeah.
Nobody in Congress makes these questions. Nobody brings this to attention. That surely the candidate, we both know that the candidates are not going to talk about this sort of stuff. But where are the Ways and Means Committee, the Appropriations Committee guys? Where's the senators? Who's talking about these issues that nobody wants to like even debate anymore?
Albert, they're all 124 years old, so they know
has something to
that
do with
they'll
it.
be dead before any repercussions are felt. That's a
Ugh.
huge problem with the legislature in the US. Is it's a position for life, especially in the Senate, and they get to be 124 years old and it doesn't matter anymore. So they're just trying to get kickback for their kids that's my view on it. So Bob, you gave me some hope. Tracy, what do you think?
What do I think? I think what about 2028? I pray Bob is right. What no, I think that I think U.S. politics has become an absolute shit show, to be honest with you. And I think it's quite embarrassing. And I think we're doing ourselves harm on the global stage. Our foreign policy is a disaster.
Yeah.
People know it, and I think that I think something's going to need to change, because I think in the last 3 elections, well, 2 and then including this one, have just been ridiculous and a half. And we need somebody real knows what they're doing.
We have no hope of real till 2020. We need things to really break down economically and socially before you can get real candidates to step up to the stage here, because this is ridiculous. I hate to say that, but when you don't have external pressures, you begin to have internal pressures within society, and we're just sitting there, bashing each other on both sides with just utter nonsense right now.
With no repercussions.
I would say that if we had,
yeah.
I would say that if this election were RFK on the Democrat side versus Vivek Ramaswamy on the Republican side, you would have an interesting election. You would have people
I agree with that,
in
actually.
actual issues, because I could totally see somebody, in that case, I'd be for Ramaswamy, but I could totally see somebody saying, well, they both agree on COVID, the medical establishment, and the US public health and how bad it is. They both agree on that.
Yeah.
Which that shouldn't be partisan. They both agree on China being dangerous. They both agree on censorship, but they disagree like on climate and on social policies and things like that. And that to me would be amazing, because that's what the two parties used to disagree on.
Well, exactly. And their politics. I mean, look, you can already name their politics because they've talked about it, where you couldn't say that about Kamala or Trump, essentially speaking, because they don't really, I know Trump's got his 47 whatever on his website, but he doesn't really talk about policies that often. So, but just the fact that off the top of your head right now, where does RFK stand on a lot of issues, where does Vivek stand on a lot of issues, is very telling, when you can't really say that about the 2 candidates that are the front runners.
I'm sure I'm gonna get all sorts of text messages later tonight when I say this, and Tony posts this video up. But if Trump loses, I don't want to hear that fucker's name ever again, ever again.
I don't disagree.
I don't want to hear the name Trump. I don't want to see his golf course. I don't want to hear nothing about the guy within the GOP at all if he loses.
I don't disagree with you at all.
Same.
I think whichever side, and Albert and I spoke about this.
We're all going to get hate messages too.
I don't care. I'm just telling you exactly how it is. I don't care.
Yeah, I prefer not to get hate messages.
If Trump loses and he costs us House seats, right?
That's a problem.
It's time to purge that entire MAGA thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's time to purge it.
Yeah. Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah. Of course.
We obviously have a problem with the U.S. Treasury and rates and how it affects it and everything. Steph Pomboy, she was on our show a few weeks back, and she had an idea that she wouldn't share with me. She said, I have an idea to basically straighten out the Treasury to a certain degree, at least temporarily, but I didn't want to share it on your show because I kind of wanted to get to Trump, and I don't want anyone to steal it. And obviously he might steal it. I'm like, you're right, he might. She goes, so I'm trying to get through to him to tell the idea. I'm making a short story long. About a month ago, she said it on Charles Payne's show on Fox. And I texted her. I'm like, you put it out there. She goes, yeah, I figure if it's on TV, no one can steal it from me. Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that.
She has an idea to make US treasuries tax-free to US citizens and US domiciled companies. Like munis are.
Never gonna happen.
That shoots Tina in the face, right? There is no alternative, because all of a sudden the yield plus the tax-free revenue really makes that attractive to a lot of people. Now, Albert, I agree with you, but what do you guys think of the idea?
Oh, the idea is fantastic. That's why it's not going to happen, because the government needs.
I love that.
The
He's so
government
dead
needs
on.
revenue.
Right, that's why they're never gonna do it.
They're never going to do it. That's a great idea. So they're never going to do it because the government needs revenue desperately now, and they're sure as hell not going to give that up in treasuries. That's a big moneymaker for the government.
But could you see like the Treasury actually selling more and yields actually dropping? It's obviously not going to replace that revenue, but replace some of it, right?
Yeah, I can see that. Like I said,
I mean, I can't do the math. That's way
Your
above my
interest
pay
expense
grade.
goes down for
Tony
sure.
can do the math somewhere in one of his models, but I can't do the math.
Absolutely. Yeah, your interest expense goes down, right? So you refinance that debt at a lower cost and your interest goes down, and that solves part of the problem. So I mean, I think it's a solid
You sell a
idea.
lot more of it domestically,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And
which is kind of
you
what saved
have-
Japan, right?
Well,
That all of their
well,
debt was held.
absolutely. And I think you also then have sovereigns put organizations in the US to buy and sell as well. So if they have a US based, LLC or C Corp or whatever investment vehicle, then they can buy and sell, one would think tax free, unless they took it out of the US. But while it circulates in the US, it's tax free.
By the way, I just said Japan got saved. I can't believe you guys didn't just jump on me for that, because they're still in a mess.
Well, it's so
But you know what I
ridiculous.
mean.
Saved
You know
is
what I mean.
relative. Saved is relative. So
Yeah.
guys, okay, I'm going to end this on hope. We've got potential good news about treasuries, right? We've got a good idea about there. We've got hope that 2028 is going to be a spectacularly interesting election, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much for this. This has been absolutely great. I really appreciate your time. Have a great weekend. Have a great weekend.
Exactly.
Thanks,
Cheers,
guys.
guys.